It's noon, so we are going to get started. Welcome everybody who has logged in so far. We'll continue letting more people in as they come.
Okay.
So welcome to our summer lunchtime lecture series, today featuring Shelia Hargis, who will be sharing her knowledge about magical migrations. I'm Kelsey McKenna, the development manager here at Travis Audubon. If you're already a member, we thank you so much for your support of our mission to inspire conservation through birding. If you're not yet a member, we welcome you today and we encourage you to become one. All of us at Travis Audubon are so grateful for your donations today. We're working hard to provide programming and continue fulfilling our mission during this crisis. We've been so thrilled with your response, especially to these Zoom lectures, and we appreciate all the ways that you're supporting Travis Audubon even when we can't be together. So a few housekeeping items just to get started. If you haven't already, please mute your microphone and turn off your camera. This will help us minimize distractions. Throughout the presentation, if you have questions or comments, feel free to add them into the chat box. We should have time at the end of Sheila's presentation to review those questions. So now on to the show. I'd like to introduce our speaker, Shelia Hargis, who many of you already know and love. I've heard Shelia talk about many bird-related topics, just like last month's Purple Martin Migration Lecture, which is still up on our YouTube channel if you missed it. Shelia has been a member and volunteer with Travis Audubon for 22 years. She has served on the TAS Board of Directors for 12 years, including 2 as board president. During her tenure, she hired staff, led the fundraising for and subsequent acquisition of 10 acres to Baker Sanctuary, and she oversaw the donation of Katura Canyon to Travis Audubon. Her service has really transformed Travis Audubon from a local birding club to a proper conservation organization, and we're forever grateful to Shelia for that. Something extra exciting that I hope you've heard about is that Shelia will be our 11th recipient of the Victor Emanuel Conservation Award. In normal days, we would have a luncheon and celebration, but this year we will be hosting a very special virtual party in her honor on Friday, October 2nd. I would like you to please mark your calendars and know that more information is coming soon. Registration is free, and not only will you be entertained, but you will come away with an even greater appreciation for the work that Shelia has done for bird conservation. We'll put the link for the event in the chat box so you can learn a little more about what we're planning to do, but please watch our website for registration to open this month. We would be so thrilled to have you and all of your friends near and far join us to honor Shelia. So, now it's time for magical migrations. Without further ado, I give you Shelia Hargis. I'll hand it off to you from here, Shelia.
Thank you, Kelsey. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you. Okay,
great. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I hope all of you appreciated the fall weather this morning, to get you in the mood for fall migrations. And that's compliments of Travis Audubon staff. They arranged that with perfect timing to, just have everything line up correct, just like we want it to. So, if, in all seriousness, if you, our staff is an amazing group of women. And so if you appreciate them as much as I do, feel free to let them know. I think appreciation would go a long way for all of us in these challenging times that we're living in. So with that, let's talk about migration. Of course, my screen doesn't want to forward. So, if you're like me, when somebody mentions migration, you immediately think of spring migration. You envision birds flying across the Gulf of Mexico and landing on the Texas coast, in those protected areas like High Island and Sabine Woods. And you envision seeing many warblers and tanagers and orioles and just an amazing array of birds. And that is absolutely a super cool thing, as a birder. But because we're headed into fall, spring migration, at least for this year, is behind us. So I wanted to focus on fall migration and hopefully share some spectacles of that you may or may not be as familiar with. So I'm going to be talking about, that southbound migration. These birds have finished their nesting time this year, and they're starting to think about heading back to where they spend their non-breeding time. And as Kelsey mentioned, I presented on purple martins in July, and so that presentation is available on the Travis Audubon YouTube channel if you missed it. So if you did, go check it out, because I think it's great. Today I'm going to talk about chimney swifts, ruby-throated hummingbirds, and then hawks as a group. So with that, I'm just going to jump right into chimney swifts. Now, just a quick reminder, this is a chimney swift. Some people describe it as a cigar with wings, and you can kind of see with that short stubby body how, somebody might think that's a short cigar, and then those really cool swept back pointed wings. Now, one aspect of this bird that is very unusual or unique is that they have lost the ability to perch. So if you think of like your backyard birds, the common birds, the cardinals, the chickadees, the titmice, the wrens, they perch, like they walk around on the ground or they perch on a limb. And so it looks like they're standing up. Well, chimney swifts have evolved to not be able to do that anymore, but in exchange, they can cling to vertical surfaces for like hours on end. And so here you see this bird doing just that. Now, another cool aspect is if you look at their tail functions just like a woodpecker's tail. It's like their prop to hold them up against that vertical surface that they're perched, that they're clinging to. So, and this evolutionary development for them has an impact on how they live their life. And we'll see how that unfolds here in just a minute. So chimney swifts are basically an eastern United States bird. This map shows, the orange on this map shows their breeding territory, and then the blue is where they're going to spend their non-breeding time. And then the yellow is a little misleading in my opinion. It shows the migratory route, but there's also, they're also migrating over the water, and it's not showing that part in yellow as it should. But basically, the job is to get from eastern United States to South America. These birds are diurnal migrants. If you, attended my purple martin presentation, you learned that they are also diurnal migrants, and that means that they migrate during the day. And then the cool thing is that in the evening, when it's time to, go to bed and rest for the night, then they come together in communal roost. Now, unlike the purple martin that roost in trees, these birds can't do that because, again, they can't perch. So they're going to find some type of structure so that they can cling to the sides of it to spend the night. For us, this is a migration event that happens in our area, and you can observe this happening easily in our area. For us, it's roughly August through October. And this is what it's going to look like. So just like the purple martins, these birds are going to gather, as it gets closer and closer to dark, they're going to gather around this structure that they're going to roost in. And then as whenever they decide, then they'll start to drop into the structure. But typically they gather and the numbers build and they swirl around and they chitter and carry on and put on a show before they actually start to drop into the structure. Now, hopefully, Paul and Georgia and Kyle, they are the stewards at Katura Canyon, and they have devoted much of their life to chimney swifts. They are pretty much the experts on chimney swifts in the world. And, they've studied them, they've tried to care for them, they've developed a chimney swift tower. So they've done all sorts of things to secure a future for our chimney swifts. And one of the things that they developed was a citizen science project, and it's called Swift Night Out. And this is an event that happens in August and September, where they encourage people across the nation to go out and find a roost site and count the swifts as they drop into the structure that they're going to spend the night in. And so members of Travis Audubon and other folks have been participating in this event for quite a few years now. And this is a map that I put together at some point showing the known roost sites. And I know I'm missing some, so maybe, you know, if you find one that's not on here, you can let me know, or let the office know, and they can add it to our list. But basically what you see is that those blue pins, there's one out in Jonestown that's a roost, there's one over in Taylor that's a roost, and then there's a lot in Austin. And I'm going to zoom into Austin so you can kind of get a sense of where these are. Now, many of the ones in Austin are schools that were built in the 1950s, and they had an incinerator. And so it's that incinerator chimney that these birds are now using to roost in. And so here's a couple of examples. The one on the left is Becker Elementary. This is my favorite location for counting and watching swifts coming into roost. The one on the right is O. Henry Middle School. And so, you know, these structures are really, I mean, they're big structures. And, you know, if you're interested in like checking out the area around your house to see if there's anything like this, you can obviously check out schools. And, you know, these are big enough structures that they're visible from an aerial view. And here's the one at O. Henry. The first one was Becker, and this is O. Henry. So, you know, you may be able to find some appropriate roost structures in your area if you did you know, kind of like an aerial search on Google. Now, they're not always you know, these rectangular structures. Sometimes they look a little differently. So the one on the left here is on Brazos Street in downtown Austin. I think it's also an incinerator chimney, but you know, it looks a little different from the other. The one in the middle is the Taylor Roost location, and this is part of their water system. I'm not sure exactly what function it serves, but it's still, you know, a tall kind of pipe. And then the one on the right is a pipe, a very large pipe that's out at Hornsby Bend. And then these are designed by the Kyles as primarily nesting structures. They're a chimney swift tower, and it can have a kiosk or not, but they're mainly built for nesting, because that's one of the kind of the bottlenecks for the conservation of these birds, is that they don't have enough nesting structures. So primary purpose is nesting, but birds can also roost in these structures. So this is a video, and this is going to give you a sense of what's happened at a roost site. And so it's already, as you can see, it's cloudy on this night, and it's already pretty dark, but you know, you'll see a lot of birds swirling around. But what you want to look for is that when they drop into the structure, their behavior is different. It looks different, and it looks as if they're dropping straight down, but there's usually a little flutter to it. So it's like nearly like a leaf fluttering to the ground. So watch on this video and see if you see any of that happening. Okay, so hopefully you saw a few. Most of those birds were, it looks like they're they're kind of flying by and looking in the structure to see who's in there. It's like, oh, am I ready to go in yet or not? And so when they drop in, you have to be really careful. You have to watch closely because they can actually fake you out at the last minute. So it'll look like they're about to drop in, and then at the last minute, they'll pull out and fly around and keep flying around, in the sky. Some will, just fly really close, but never actually even try to drop in. So I'm hoping that after my presentation today, you're going to be inspired to go and check out roost sites and even try to count them. So I've got some practice exercises for you. So this is, again, at Becker, my favorite location. And so watch for those that, look like they're dropping straight down and doing a little flutter. And then be careful because some of them are gonna, pull out at the last moment and keep flying. See, those are faking you out. Those two went in, those went in, that one went in, that one went in. So that's what you're looking for, is that behavior. That one in, in. Oh, those two faked us out or tried to. That one in. So you can totally go out and just watch the show. You don't have to count, but if you want to contribute to, to our understanding, our citizen science project, then I encourage you to try to count. And so what you want to do is you want to have either a hand clicker or an app on your phone that allows you to count. And I have the app on my phone, and then I just click it, as birds go in. Now, you may think that it's this, oh my gosh, this is simple. This is no problem. I'm going to be able to easily do that. Well, and on nights like this one, you can absolutely do it. It's really easy. But that's not the full story. So watch this one and try to count these birds. All of those are going in. So I'm hoping somebody, we're going to have a test at the end of this. And so you're going to be expected to provide the number of chimney swifts that dropped into that tower just then. So, okay, so I'm kidding, but you can see how it can at times be really challenging. And so I have my method for counting is usually to count by tens, because there's no way I can click one time for each of those birds that dropped in, especially when they're dropping in at 10 or 20 or more birds at a time. So it can go from pretty easy to really challenging, but I find it to be great fun. And it depends on the location, it depends on the time of year, but I've had up to, I think, 1,600 chimney swifts dropping into one structure is the highest I've ever had. And typically at Becker, I think it was like 800 on Sunday night, something around there. So there can be a lot of birds dropping into these structures, and it's a pretty cool thing to observe. So I'm only covering a small snippet of the life of these birds, right? And so I'm hoping that you'll want to learn more. And to do that with chimney swifts, a really good website to go to is chimneyswifts.org. This is a website that Paul and Georgia and Kyle have had up for quite a few years, and they have information on chimney swifts. They have information on their on how to build chimney swift towers, and it's also where you go to log your data for Swift Night Out. Another good resource for information is Chimney Swift Working Group on Facebook. And then here's a couple of books by Paul and Georgia and Kyle. The first one is about Chimney Swifts themselves, so it's kind of like a natural history book. And then the one on the right is about, if you're interested in building a tower, mainly a nest structure, either in your yard or in a neighborhood park, then this would be the book that you would want to check out. And then this one is a kid's book written by Kay Hart and Ann Donovan, who are Travis Audubon members, and illustrated by Georgia and Kyle. So appropriate for kids if you're trying to engage in birds. And then it's other ways that you can help these birds. Their population is declining, and so we need to help them in every way possible. And if you have a house that's of a certain age, then more than likely your chimney has brick or rock on the inside of it. And if you have that type of chimney, then you can uncap it and potentially have Chimney Swifts nesting in your chimney. So that's a great way to help them out. If you don't have that, like maybe your house is a little more, was built more recently, then you probably don't have that situation. You have like a metal flue like I have on my chimney. And so that is obviously not appropriate for these birds to use as a nest site, but you could potentially build a Chimney Swift tower, either, again, in your yard or in a neighborhood park. And then, always participate in citizen science whenever you can. And so Swift Night Out is an event that happens, it's the second weekend in August and the second weekend in September. And that's when we're encouraging people to get out and count at these roost sites and then enter your data into the database. So if you're interested in that, you can contact the office or and they can send you to me if you want to learn more about how to participate. And then, just like the purple martin's roost, these roosts are also very cool for non-birders. So I encourage you to, take your family for sure to go see the roost, and then, safely take your friends to go see it also. And then if you happen to find a roost site that's, one that we don't necessarily know about, then, just check it out and make sure that the owner understands the importance of that structure to the future of Chimney Swifts. All right, so that's my little spiel about Chimney Swifts. Now I'm going to move on to ruby-throated hummingbirds. These birds are, they're not going to migrate quite as far as purple martins or Chimney Swifts. They're only going to southern Mexico and Central America, basically. So, not quite as long a journey, but, every time I think about how small hummingbirds are and the fact that they're flying 500 to 600 miles nonstop across the Gulf of Mexico, that is amazing. If that's not amazing to you, I'm at a loss for what would be. That is an amazing feat. Now, unlike purple martins and Chimney Swifts, hummingbirds are nocturnal migrants. So they are flying at night. So that's actually not the actual migration is actually not the cool part of their migration journey for us. We'll talk about what is. We in Austin have ruby-throated hummingbirds. We also have black-chinned hummingbirds. So we have a little bit of an ID challenge for us. But in general, we do have both of these birds moving through our area. And it's roughly mid-August through late October. But the best place to go see this event is on the coast. And the peak migration, at least around, in Texas, is mid-September. Now, I also want to point out what I just put on the screen is the bar chart for ruby-throated hummingbirds for Aransas County. And that's the county that Rockport is in. And what this chart shows is that if you look over to the right to September, you see that the little green rectangles are bigger about mid-September. So that's where that's when they have the most hummingbirds. And then the numbers, they start to fall off into late November. But what you you can see by this chart is that there are birds that are overwintering in that county. And you know, the map that we were looking at doesn't really indicate that. It would give you the impression that they're all migrating south, but not all of them are. And what we're seeing with hummingbirds is that more and more of them are overwintering with us because our winters are not that severe anymore. So just a little note there that, you know, they're not all leaving, but the vast majority of them are. So a quick reminder on, you know, what a ruby-throated hummingbird looks like. This is a male ruby-throated hummingbird. It's in perfect lighting to see that red throat. That's called the gorget. And if you see this, then it's like, okay, it's really easy to identify this bird. But the thing to keep in mind with this is that that red is not pigment. There's no red pigment in those feathers. This is the structure of the feather that is refracting light in such a way that it appears red to us. So if the angle changes, if the light changes, then that gorget that, you know, that looked red, all red before, is going to look different now. And so like on this bird, you can see some feathers, you know, are refracting the light in just the right way for us to see red, but some of them are now looking like they're black. So it can get even more challenging. It's like, boy, this one's really hard. I can see a little bit of reddish in the gorget on this bird, but not much. And then this one looks totally black to me. So just keep that in mind that, you know, just because it doesn't look red right now doesn't mean that it's not a ruby-throated hummingbird. Now, you know, in the wrong lighting, so to speak, it's going to be challenging to tell. You won't be able to tell based on color whether this is a ruby-throated hummingbird or a black-chinned hummingbird. So again, the challenges that we face in Austin having both of these species is, you know, is a discussion for another day. So I'm not going to go into the differences, but just know that we have both here, and they can be hard to distinguish. And the females are just nearly impossible. So if you're interested in learning more about hummingbird identification and distinguishing ruby-throated from black-chinned, then I encourage you to take the Travis Audubon Hummingbird class taught by Dr. Byron Stone. Okay, so this is that same map we looked at before. And what is happening is that, you know, we have all of these birds that are further north that are making their way south. And when they get to the Gulf Coast, what they do is they hang out there for a while. They don't just continue flying across the Gulf of Mexico. They hang out along the coast and they eat as much as they can, because they need to build up their fat reserves so that they can make the journey across the Gulf of Mexico. It takes a lot of energy to fly 500 to 600 miles, and so they have to build up their fat. And so they hang out and they eat a lot. And so that's what works in our favor, because if you're on the coast, then you're surrounded by hummingbirds. And this is what it can look like. So you have a feeder that, you know, typically if I have 2 hummingbirds in my yard here in Austin, I'm all excited. It's like, oh, I got 2, you know, but, you know, I've never had anything like this in my yard. So it can be really spectacular. Now, this is a video that I took at in Rockport a few years back. I was down there to give a presentation at the festival. And so I was out doing some birding before the presentation. And so this is at one of my favorite little parks. It's really a little park. It's Linda Castro, and it's on the main road there. And so they had up feeders, and so I took this video, and you know, it's not a ton of birds, but you can see, you can get a sense of them flying around. And you know, the one that's on the kind of the above the left-hand feeder, you can see that red gorget. So watch for some red gorgets as these birds fly around. It's really hard for me to imagine that they could ever build up any fat reserves given the frenetic pace that they live their lives, but somehow they do, and that works in our favor. So on this day, it was it was kind of interesting because I thought, well, okay, there's some birds here. They're not, you know, a ton of them, but there's some cool birds here. And then I went to the festival and was talking to the coordinators there, and they said, oh yeah, there were many more birds yesterday. So it's like, oh, don't you hate it when, you know, people say, oh yeah, all the birds were here yesterday. It's like, darn it. But anyway, I had a good time. Now, this video is a video taken in September of 2017. And in August of 2017, Hurricane Harvey devastated Rockport and the surrounding area. And companies like Wild Birds Unlimited and other similar companies sent a lot of hummingbird feeders, and others provided sugar so that the residents could take care of the birds, because the hurricane had obviously devastated the wild food sources, the wild, you know, flowers and plants that these birds would use to get, you know, food. And so this video shows one woman's yard where she had put out a bunch of these feeders, and you can just see, you know, the amazing number of birds that are here. So hopefully this is going to work. It's been a little tricky, but let's see. Hopefully it'll work. So now I have watched this video numerous times in preparation for this presentation, and every time I watch it, it gives me chill bumps. It's just like, it's so moving to know that these people who have experienced devastation, you know, maybe their house is gone or, you know, damaged, maybe their business is gone or heavily damaged, but they still cared enough to take care of the hummingbirds. So that nearly makes me cry every time I watch this. So I love people like that. Now, if you can obviously experience this spectacle by going to the coast on your own. But I highly encourage you to check out the Hummingbird Celebration. That is a festival that happens in Rockport. This year it's going to be virtual, so you know, not quite as great as being there in person, but hopefully you'll keep it in mind and check it out next year when I'm hoping it's going to be safe for us to, you know, get together in person again. And you know, they offer field trips, they offer presentations, they offer maps where you can actually just go around and visit people's houses and sit on their porch and watch all the hummingbirds at all their feeders. So it's a really cool way of experiencing the birds. Now, the best part of this festival, in my opinion, is the hummingbird banding. And so they're going to catch hummingbirds in mist nets, and then they're going to gather all sorts of data. They're going to look at how much fat they have, you know, how long their wing feathers are, their tail feathers, all sorts of information they're going to gather. And that's what this guy here is doing. He's got a hummingbird in his hand, and then the woman to his left is taking down all the data, and that data will be entered into some database so that researchers have more data to understand ruby-throated hummingbirds. And they're going to end this process by putting a band on the bird's leg. So, you know, as you might expect, the band is really small because we're talking about a really small bird. And that is it on top of a penny. So it's tiny. And the way that that works is that if this bird survives migration and comes back to this location and gets captured again, then they can read the number that's on the band and determine, well, where was that bird banded? Was it banded here, in what time of, year, what year, or was it banded somewhere else? So that gives us some indication of, gives us more data about ruby-throated hummingbirds. And then this is like the best part, in my opinion, of this is that, when is a hummingbird ever still enough that you can get this close and get this good a look? So they'll hold the bird up and let people really study them up close before they release them. And then when it's time to release them, they usually ask for a volunteer from the audience. And, if there are kids around, it's usually the kids that get to do this. But they'll tell them to hold out their hand, and then they'll put the bird on its back in their palm. And typically it takes the bird a while to orient and to take off, or even you may have to kind of help them turn over to get them to take off. But again, it's a really awesome way of being up close and personal with these birds. So when I was there was this couple that were in Rockport from England, I believe, somewhere in Europe. And they had come to Rockport to see hummingbirds for the first time. Now, you may not know this, but we are very fortunate to live in the Americas, because hummingbirds only live in the Americas. So you can't see hummingbirds in Europe. You have to come to the Americas. And so they came to this festival. And so obviously, but we decided that she was the one who should be able to release this bird. So what you're going to see is the guy in the blue shirt on the right, he's obviously holding the hummingbird. And then the guy in the blue shirt on the left-hand side is trying to, capture this video. So check this out.
Going?
Not yet. There we go. On the roll, right?
All right.
So, the bird took off a little quicker than we were anticipating, but I still think from the expression on that woman's face that that was a memorable experience that she will not likely forget ever. And this is the next guy who got to release one, so it's going to be the same situation.
Just on general principle.
Feel that heartbeat?
Oh my.
Okay, I'm gonna roll him so his feet are under him, and then he'll probably take off. So if anybody wants to go into movie mode, this would be a good time to do it. Wow. Here we go.
Wow.
So pretty cool experience. All right, so hopefully, again, just a snippet of, a life of a hummingbird, but hopefully now you'll want to learn more about them. And National Audubon has a great website. It's called Celebrate Hummingbirds. It has lots of great information about hummingbirds, so I definitely would recommend you go there to check to learn more. There's all sorts of books on hummingbirds. Here are 3 that I like. National Audubon also has a webpage that is about designing a hummingbird garden. So if you want to, the best scenario is to have native plants that provide nectar sources, as well as your hummingbird feeders. So this is a good resource for learning how to create a wildlife garden specifically for hummingbirds. Now, this slide is basically me just bragging about my yard. One year it looked really, really good. And so on the left-hand side is in the springtime, where you've got those tall red standing cypress. Yeah, I think that's right. The tall ones are really good for hummingbirds. They've got those tubular blooms. And then the kind of the coral color one is red yucca. And then the white one is the twisted leaf yucca. So all of those are potentially good for hummingbirds. And then the other photo is in the fall, because you can see the American beautyberry in bloom. But to the right of that is Turk's cap, and that's another really good one for hummingbirds. Now on Travis Audubon's website, we have a list of really good native plants for hummingbirds. So check that out if you're interested. Now, as far as what you can do to help these birds, Providing habitat is probably the best thing to do. You know, if you're going to, you know, plant those native plants, remember that in addition to drinking nectar, hummingbirds also eat insects. And especially if the female is feeding young on the nest, she needs to feed them protein. And so think about that in relation to, you know, not using pesticides or using it very, very limited pesticides if you have to. Also, I'm a huge fan of eBird, so always submit your sightings to eBird. iNaturalist is also a really great you know, database of flora and fauna sightings. So if you're into taking photographs, you can enter your data there. There's a Birds of Texas project, so your photos could be part of that. And then National Audubon has a Hummingbirds at Home project. Where they're encouraging people to observe hummingbirds and then to know what type of plants they're using. So check that out if you're interested. All right, now moving on to hawks. So hawks, I just wanted to kind of, as a group, talk about them, because typically at a hawk watch, you're going to see a lot of different hawks. So they're this is a spectacle that's a little harder to see here. We do have hawks moving through, but there's nothing to really concentrate them like happens along the coast. And so it's more dispersed, and it's not usually as awesome as it can be along the coast. But hawks are moving through mid-August through mid-November. And the peak, at least on the coast, is usually late September. So here's some of the birds, the hawks that you might see, or raptors that you might see at a hawk watch. This is a broad-winged hawk. This is a light phase broad-winged hawk. This is the dark phase of a broad-winged hawk, and I just find this bird to be so stunningly beautiful. It's potentially because it looks like chocolate that I like it so much, but anyway, I still think it's gorgeous. And then this is the perch bird. So broad-winged hawks they migrate in large numbers. So it's not unusual to have 100,000 broad-winged hawks come through a hawk watch on the coast, you know, during August to November. This is a Swainson's hawk, another very awesome bird. This is it perched. They can also come through in large numbers. Mississippi kite. They can come through in large numbers. I'm not sure how the numbers compare to each other. Broad-winged hawks, I think, are the top. You know, you get the most number of individuals coming through in broad-winged hawks, but you can still have a good number of Mississippi kites coming through. And then here are some that come through usually as individual birds. You can have them throughout the day, but they're coming through as individuals. So this is a Cooper's hawk. This is a sharp-shinned hawk. And this is a swallowtail kite. Okay, so there's 3 hawk watches that I know of in Texas. I'm not very familiar with the one that's down in the valley, so I'm going to focus on the 2 that I'm more familiar with. And that is one that's just north of Corpus Christi, and one that's just basically north of Galveston, and that is called the Smith Point Hawk Watch. Now, what is happening with hawks is that the way that most species, the way they migrate is that they don't flap a lot. They try not to flap. That expends too much energy. And so what they're going to do is they're going to find thermals, which are hot pockets of air rising up from the earth, and they're going to swirl around in that thermal and gain elevation. And then when they get high enough, they're going to stream off in the direction that they're headed. And as they're streaming, they're going to lose elevation, but then they'll encounter another hot pocket, another thermal. And so they'll circle around in it, gain elevation, and stream off again. So it's that process over and over again. Well, when you get to the ocean, there's no hot pockets of air. It's all a kind of a uniform temperature. And so hawks, for the most part, try very hard not to fly over water. So what you have happening here is you have these birds that are coming from the north, they're coming south, and then they get to the coast and they go, whoa, wait a minute. And then they follow the land around. They're what's called circumgulf migrants. So they're not going to go across the Gulf, they're going to go around the Gulf, staying on land as much as possible. So that plays into why these two locations are really good locations for hawk watches. Now this is Hazel Baysmore. This is the location, the hawk watch location that is just north of Corpus Christi. And it's a county park. It's, as you can see from this, it's along the Nueces River. That land that kind of looks like it's, you know, mowed or closer to the river is obviously lower. It is lower elevation. It's short grass. There's some ponds and such in there. And then the area that looks like it has trees is higher elevation. And so this park is a great park for birds of all kinds. You don't just come here to watch hawks. You see all sorts of really cool birds here. But what is part of what makes this a good location is that elevation change, the wind hits it and the wind goes straight up. And so it's like a thermal that allows the birds to gain elevation and then continue on their way. This is the Hawk Watch platform. They have professional hawk counters from mid-August through mid-November, I believe. And these people are out there every day counting the birds that come through and then entering that data into a database so that we can better understand what's happening. And then visitors can come and they can hang out on the platform and listen to the hawk, you know, what the hawk counters are calling out as far as species that they're seeing, and actually even contribute and say, hey, you know, I'm seeing this over here. With Smith Point, this is even a more interesting situation because as you can imagine, the birds have come down, they've started to hit some water and they've kind of turned west, you know, to head around the water, but then they get to Smith Point and they go, oh my gosh, what the heck is going on? There's water everywhere, right? And so they turn around again and head north to go around that body of water. So it's a really cool situation. Now this, I think this is like maybe 1 foot above sea level, if that high. So obviously they had to build a tower here so you could get up above and see things better. And this is the same situation. They have professional hawk counters there every day gathering the data, and then you can join them and help, you know, help spot and count hawks. Now, these are two drastically different experiences in my opinion. And so what I'm showing here is the eBird checklist or bar chart for Corpus Christi and the one for Smith Point. And the experiences are different at these two. Corpus Christi, you typically get more birds, more individuals coming through, but they can be really high up in the sky and kind of hard to see. You get some low ones, but a lot of them are coming over really high. Smith Point, on the other hand, you don't have as many birds coming through, but they're typically lower. So you can get to see them a little bit better at Smith Point. So just as an example of how the species differences between these locations, look at white-tailed kite. So for Corpus Christi, you know, it's mid-September through the end of September, and then basically you're not going to see white-tailed kites at Corpus Christi. For Smith Point, on the other hand, it's basically, you know, kind of gets started in September all the way through November. So things are different depending on, you know, the location. Swallowtail kite is another one where, you know, August, maybe into September at Corpus Christi, but a longer time frame that they're coming through at Smith Point. So I encourage you, if you can go visit both of these, to absolutely do that. So this is a video that I took. I was in a Travis Audubon Hawk class taught by Dr. Byron Stone, and we had already, earlier in the class, we had gone to Hazel Baysmore and saw amazing birds there. And so this one, we're at Smith Point. And we were there in October, and it's like, oh, we may be too late. It had been really, really kind of boring up until that point. It's like, oh man, we may get there and there's no birds. But luckily, the birding god smiled on us, and we had a good turnout of birds. So ignore the talking on this video, but just sit back and enjoy these hawks.
Yeah, but they're still streaming out. Tell me what you think.
I don't look. Oh, there's to the left of us. All the
It's gonna be like the purple martins. They're all gonna come over us like this.
So I don't know about you, but you know, I get excited when I'm driving on Mopac and I have 3 red-tailed hawks perched on the poles along my drive to North Austin. It's like having this many raptors is like so cool and such an unusual experience. Now, this is another thing that, you know, another challenge or exciting aspect of this is that you'll have many broad-winged hawks. Like the majority of those birds on that first video were broad-winged hawks. The majority that you're about to see on this one are broad-winged hawks. They have now started to stream. They were kettling before, right, circling around, gaining elevation, and now in this video they're going to stream off in the direction that they're headed. But the challenge is to spot things that are different. So already in this photo you should probably be seeing a couple of things that look different to you. So just watch the video.
We gotta go off to the missile and go around. Yeah, he's gonna get out.
All right, one more opportunity to get to, again, watch for something different. So again, the majority of these broad-winged hawks, but there's some, you know, look closely and see if you can see something that, you know, maybe a different size, maybe a darker looking bird, something along those lines. All right, so in that view, I see, you know, at least 3 different birds kind of in the center of that view. And those, I believe, are turkey vultures. So here's a photo, and this is really obvious. They're much lower and much clearer in this photo, but obviously this bird is different than the others. So the others are broad-winged hawks, light-phased broad-winged hawks, and this is a turkey vulture. So you can see this bird is obviously bigger and just a drastically different color than the broad-winged hawk, so it should stand out to you. This is another example, and you may say, oh, this is another turkey vulture, but look closer. This is actually that dark-phased broad-winged hawk. And what you want to look at is like, don't just focus in on the color, but look at the shape and size of the bird. So you can see, if you compare the shape and size of this bird to the other hawks around it, you can see that it's basically the same shape and size. So this is the dark-phased broad-winged hawks surrounded by light-phased broad-winged hawks. And then you never know when something else is going to show up. So this is, you know, the lighter looking birds are the broad-winged hawks, and then we have a group of anhingas who were right there in the mix coming through. And then if you look even closer, then you see some turkey vultures. So it's all a great challenge. And I will say, you know, identifying hawks on the wing is really challenging in my opinion, and especially at Hazel Bazemore when they're really, really high in the sky. Those hawk counters are amazing at their ability to identify these birds. So it's pretty cool to observe and try to learn from them. All right, so how to learn more. There's so much more to know about birds. Gulf Coast Bird Observatory is the nonprofit organization that is in charge of the Smith Point Hawk Watch. Hawk Watch International is the organization that's in charge of the Corpus Christi or Hazel Bazemore Hawk Watch. So you go to their website, check them out, and they have more information about the hawk watches as well as hawks. And then there's many books out there on how to identify hawks, and you need probably all of them to you know, get to as good as those hawk counters are. All right, now every year in September, usually the last week in September, the Hazel Bazemore Hawk Watch has a celebration of flight event. And I don't know if they're having that this year. I kind of doubt it. but keep it on your radar for next year when hopefully we can get together again, because it's a really cool opportunity to go out. It's at the time where typically you have the peak number of birds coming through, and you'll have presentations, you have people there with rehabbed birds, educational birds, so you can get up close and see them, and then you just get to hang out and watch a bunch of birds come through. So it's a very awesome opportunity to learn more and just have a really good time. As far as how to contribute to the future of hawks, just think about your pesticide use. If you can totally do away with it, that's the best way, in my opinion. But if you have to use it very judiciously, and think about, if you poison that rat, that is potentially going to be lunch for a hawk. So just, and that poison is going to impact that bird. It may not kill it, but it's going to make it feel bad, and that's not a good thing. So limit your pesticide usage when you can. Gulf Coast Bird Observatory and Hawkwatch International are both nonprofit organizations, so I encourage you to become a member. And then, of course, enter your sightings into eBird. So with that, I think I'm done, Kelsey. And thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to talk about birds. If you know me, I love to talk about birds, so I appreciate the opportunity today. Thank you.
Well, we're so lucky to have you, Shelia. Thanks for that fabulous presentation. We had so many people in the chat box kind of sharing their own experiences with some of the species that you mentioned, and lots of excitement, especially around those hummingbird videos. We do have a couple questions for you if you've got the time. So you shared some migration maps and those green bar charts. People are wondering where they might be able to find those bar charts and migration maps. Is that an eBird thing?
Yes, the bar charts are coming from eBird, and the maps, I believe I got those from allaboutbirds.org, which ties into the eBird data. They build those maps based on the eBird data. So yeah, check out allaboutbirds.org for a certain species, and you should be able to see those maps.
That's wonderful. And Shelia, what is your spark bird?
So I think, when I think back, I think it was a male painted bunting. I was on my intro to birds class, and we saw one out in the Bastrop area, and I was blown away that there could be this tropical looking bird that was native to Texas.
Amazing. Well, that looks like all the questions we had. It's mostly just people amazed at all of this information that they have learned. And plenty of people are agreeing painted bunting is the gateway to birding obsession for sure. So for people wondering, this whole presentation will be up on the Travis Audubon website shortly. Okay, we do have one more question that just came in.
Okay.
Do hummers have any control on showing their gorget?
Yes, it's amazing that birds have a lot of control over all of their feathers. So like, for instance, if a male hummingbird is really trying to show off to a potential mate, he can adjust the angle of those feathers, which is going to impact the refraction of the light, and really show off for her. And if we happen to be around, we get to see it too.
Wonderful. Okay, well, that's all the questions that we have. Thank you so much, Shelia, for sharing your expertise with us.
Yes,
and thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope that we'll see you again next week for our lunchtime lecture series. But take care and be well.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.